Hi everybody, welcome to our She Speaks, We Hear session with Saimma Dyer and Fatimah Ashrif. So Fatimah and Saimma are the co-creators of Ray of God, a non-profit organization promoting feminine spiritual wisdom, and they are launching their first online festival, which is going to coincide with Halloween weekend, and you can find out more about the festival at rayofgod.com. And the hashtag you can use is hashtag Rayfest20. So before I ask Fatimah and Saimma to tell us a little bit about themselves and why they set up this organization, I thought I would just do a little bit of an introduction to She Speaks, We Hear. So She Speaks, We Hear is an online platform for the unfiltered voices of everyday women to share their experiences and their perspectives, and they can talk about anything at all. And the key for us is that women really have ownership over their voices with no other agenda put onto them, and that we can help elevate the voices of women, especially Muslim women. Okay, so Fatimah and Saimma, thank you so much for joining me today. I was really excited when I saw the details of the Ray of God Festival. It just looks really inspiring, and you've got a fantastic range of speakers. But I thought it would be really nice if you could both tell us a little bit about yourselves, and I've given a kind of very sort of headline introduction, and if you could also just sort of introduce yourselves as well, please. So over to you, Saimma.
Thank you, Akeela. First of all, just want to say thank you so much for having us on. It's an absolute honour and privilege, and I love the work that you've been doing with your team on She Speaks, We Hear. And I think the word that really came out to me was about unfiltered. I love that you've got that in your blurb, because I think that really resonates with what we're doing with the Ray of God. Absolutely unfiltered voices of women that can speak without any prohibitions. Her voice, her space. And that's the theme of the festival, which we'll get to later. So I'm Saimma Dyer. I live in Kendal, which is the doorway to the beautiful Lake District. I feel very blessed and privileged to live here. I'm a children's publisher. Some people may know me from GP Press. I'm the managing director there. And I'm also a project and events manager for various faith charities, and basically anything that really kind of speaks to my heart and that I'm interested in. I feel very lucky to be able to get involved with that. And a lot of the work is online, which is, means that I can work around the world with projects as well. So that's me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Saimma. And Fatimah, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Yes, Akeela, thank you so much for having us and for arranging this opportunity for us to speak about what is currently a big joy for our hearts. So I live in Hale Barnes in Cheshire. It's raining today, as one expects in this part of the world, so no different from usual. So what can I tell you about myself? So my work is, I head up the work of a charitable trust, and we make grants in three sort of main areas, which cross sort of Islamic education, interfaith relations and understanding, and youth-related projects. It's something that I transitioned into about 5 years ago. Before that, I lived life as a very reluctant lawyer in the commercial world. I was very grateful to be given a way out of that, which the divine provided in the right time, I think. So very excited that my work also, very grateful that my work also gives me space to get involved and find time to do things like Ray and Rumi Circle, which I guess we'll touch upon as the interview goes on. I'd also like to say that I've recently become an aunt again. My brother and sister-in-law gave birth to a baby girl. Yes, yesterday.
Aww.
And
wow, so soon.
yeah, just yesterday. So we're really grateful. I think Saimma and I see her as, welcoming in the festival. Her name is Isla, which means the halo around the moon. And of course, the festival is hitting a full moon, the blue full moon. So we feel that the signs are leading the way, inshallah.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's really nice. Really, little babies just bring so much sort of blessings and things with them anyway. So that's really, and what a beautiful name as well. So thank you so much to both of you for your introductions. So just sort of having spoken to you for the last sort of 5 minutes when we were kind of setting up the Zoom, it's clear you both have such a deep rapport. So I was wondering, could you tell us, how did you meet each other? How have you come, to working with each other?
Yeah, I suppose one thing we didn't mention, having both forgotten, is that alongside everything else that we do, we also we facilitate a Zikr circle under the auspices of Threshold Society, which is with Sheikh Kabir and Camille Helminski. And we've both been doing this for a number of years, and we met through a retreat of the Threshold Society, which must have been about 12 or 13 years ago. I don't know.
Wow.
Basically, long time ago.
Long time.
Yeah.
We were very young then.
We were very young, too young and naive.
You're always young at heart. So, but I mean, mashallah, I mean, that's lovely that your relationship has kind of, has kind of grown over the years. And just for people who wouldn't necessarily know, what is a Zikr circle? If you could just explain.
Yeah, so basically there's lots of Sufi schools or tariqas, and we belong to the Mevlevi tariqa, which is founded on the teachings of Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi. And so our teachers, they've translated a lot of Mevlana's work into English, and they themselves have learnt through the Mevlevi tariqa with their teachers who are based in Turkey, and they're just passing on the knowledge that they've learnt and helping us to deepen our understanding of God through Mevlana's work, of God, of unity, of oneness, and how to align with our soul's purpose in the world, and to do productive work and be of service. And we both feel really lucky. I always say that Mevlana found me when I wasn't very spiritual and I was very lost, and it felt like I was called back to an Islam that I was nominally Muslim, but it was a completely different type of Islam to that I had grown up with. So I always feel like I converted back to Islam, the real essence. And with our Zikr circles, we study the poetry and the works of Mevlana Rumi, and we invite people to just share from their heart what speaks to them. And we also do Zikr, which is remembrance, using Arabic phrases and repeating them. And very familiar ones that all Muslims would understand: Astaghfirullah, La ilaha illallah, Allah, and then some additional phrases, names of gods that we might feel drawn to call upon, or we've been prescribed. And our gatherings, we have at the moment, I believe we have 3 or 4 circles in the UK, but Threshold Society has circles around the world. And our gatherings are not segregated, and everyone is welcome, whether they're Muslim or not, if they're just curious, if they're just exploring. And we have a retreat every year, which is the only time I used to see Fatimah was once a year. We would see each other for 2.5 days, or even, I don't even know if it was 2.5, but it felt like a very long time. And meeting each other year upon year. I used to live in London, Fatimah was in Manchester, and then my husband and I decided to move up north. And really the pull was, well, we used to attend a circle in London, and we thought, well, what's going to happen when we move up north? And then we thought, well, there's Fatimah, and there are other friends from Threshold who live in the north. And so together we created a circle so that we could continue being, in that community with each other. And really through the being together in a Threshold circle, we started our first project together, which was Rumi Circle, which Fatimah kind of had the vision for, of sharing the work of Mevlana in the north, because a lot of stuff happens in London. We're always hearing that there's a lot of events happening in London, all the interesting things happening in London. So we thought, well, we're in the north, so why don't we do something? And really the initial desire was just to share the poetry of Mevlana, which we loved so much and had nourished us so much. And we thought, even if it's just, the 6 of us that was, in the circle at that time, if it's just us, that'll be wonderful. We get to spend an afternoon together. And alhamdulillah, I think that first gathering, we had about 35 people.
Wow.
That just kind of showed up, and it grew from there. And that's how we started working together. Very grateful, alhamdulillah. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing, and it sounds so interesting. I wish I could have sort of attended some of those circles. And it's interesting how Rumi does cross. He crosses cultures. His wisdom and his spirituality. It's not just for Sufis or just for Muslims, and that's really amazing. And I'm sure some of that has kind of led to the both of you coming together and creating and setting up Ray of God. So, could you tell us a little bit about what inspired you? What was your inspiration? What was your motivation behind setting up Ray of God?
Yes, so Ray of God really has come through the almost like the portal of our work with Rumi Circle. So in a way, Mevlana has been an opening to so much, and the Threshold Society too. And for both Saimma and I, whilst working together on Rumi Circle, we were also both becoming really intrigued by the idea of the sacred feminine and what that meant. I think an opening for me, and maybe even Saimma can say something about this too, was hearing the words of the Quran recited by our teacher, Camille Helminski. It was the first time I had publicly heard a woman recite the Quran back in 2007 or 2008 at a retreat. And just hearing the words of the Quran, I think just kind of opened something up in me, which I think that then, just it did its magic over a period of time. And we found over the years this interest emerging in the sacred feminine, not just within both Saimma and I, but actually other women in our community and even the men in our community, wanting to understand about the sacred aspect of God, the sacred feminine aspect of God, but also the feminine within ourselves, and what that means and how that looks, what our tradition says about it, what other traditions say about it. And also Saimma and I have always been really keen and interested in supporting gender equality. I think the question of gender has always been important to us both personally too. So somehow an inspiration kind of came of us holding a gathering, a retreat on this theme of the sacred feminine. And things just began to fall into place. We found our speakers and we held a retreat. And that was, Saimma, what year was that? Was that
2016.
2016 was the first retreat. And we ended up holding it under the Rumi Circle banner, really, because it just seemed natural at the time that that's where it would sit. And it was such a rich gathering, of people. From our speakers were from different traditions, and our attendees, actually, a lot of them were from our own sort of spiritual circle, but we had some from outside too. But that led on then to another retreat in which we explored the theme of sacred pattern, which was really about the balance between the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. And again, we had male and female speakers, again from different traditions, including our own. And that then sort of led into the possibility of a third retreat. And that sort of, there was a slightly longer period between that second and third retreat. And in that period, something sort of shifted, and we sort of began to feel that perhaps this third retreat needed to be under a different banner. And just through a joint sort of feeling into it, we feel that we'll talk about this a bit more, that perhaps it will come out a bit more in our conversations, that this feeling into things we feel is part of the feminine, that to not be striving forward with this strategic plan, which has its place, but that because we were in this mode of exploring the sacred feminine, we just really wanted to feel into where would these retreats go next, and so it really felt very important that something new be created, and that this third retreat be conducted under that banner. And Ray came to the heart, and I think really it was Saimma that came with this inspiration of Ray, and Ray comes from some poetry of Mevlana. So this is, you know, when I mentioned earlier that, you know, Mevlana has been a portal for this. I mean, some people talk about Mevlana, and I don't, you know, wish to be you know, to offend anybody in any way, but some people have spoken about Mevlana as almost as having the soul of a woman, because he was somebody that really understood, it seemed, that, you know, what the feminine was about. And in some of his poetry you can really see his appreciation of both the masculine and the feminine, and the way that they balance and support each other in existence. But there are some lines from Mevlana that, you know, our specific sort of inspiration for our, you know, for our organization, for the name of Ray, and are just reminders of them. And they go like this: she is not that kind of beloved most imagine. She is a ray of God. She is not just a created, she is creative. So Ray, really, the name comes from this inspiration of Mevlana Rumi. And what's really beautiful, Saimma and I were reflecting on, is just actually how powerful the you know, this particular sort of selection is, you know, the preceding verses. For example, you know, the verse that precedes the one that I have just recited for you, this is very, very powerful. The prophet said, "Woman prevails over the wise man, while the raw and ignorant prevail over her. Those men who lack tenderness and affection are animals, not men." And, you know, there is just something so affirming of the position of the feminine and the position of women. And of course, you know, Mevlana is, at times he's speaking about women, at times he's speaking of the feminine, it seems, as a principle of existence alongside the masculine. So there is another really beautiful sort of piece from Mevlana, which I'll just read a little bit. I'm actually sort of quoting from Love's Ripening, which is a beautiful compilation translated by Kabir Helminski, one of our teachers, and Ahmed Rezwani. But just to sort of give you a sense of the masculine and the feminine within Mevlana's work, and just really, I guess, where some of our inspiration is flowing from, you know. Yeah, I think Saimma and I would both say that since we came on this path, so much has been gifted to us, and I think that this is part of the gift. The desire in the female for the male is so that they may perfect each other's work. God put desire in man and woman in order that the world should be preserved by this union. God instills the desire of every part for the other. From their union, creation results. So I encourage our listeners to pick up Mevlana and enjoy these words. So yes, I hope that answers a little bit your question. And there is, I mean, there's so much more that's fed into it over the years too. Saimma, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
No, I think you know, you've beautifully captured it, and I'm really glad that you read the other phrases as well. So Love's Ripening, that book is one that we draw upon a lot when we're looking for inspiration and sharing about the work, not just of the feminine and masculine, but for any themes really that we do with Rumi. So I think, yeah, and I just really feel, you know, when we were thinking about continuing the work with the sacred feminine, I just felt there was something really powerful in what Mevlana says. You know, it's very few lines, you know, she is not created, she is creative. But I almost want to capitalize creative, because I feel and then again, you know, I don't want to offend, this is just something that comes to my heart, is that perhaps Mevlana was trying to allude to something that he couldn't quite say explicitly in those times about the power of women. And one of the things that has been really important for both Fatimah and myself, you know, exactly seeing a female teacher reciting the Quran. I mean, I cried for the first, I don't know how many years of coming to this path, because first of all, I thought, this is blasphemy. Like, this shouldn't be happening. And then I had to check myself and say, well, why do I feel like this? You know, even if I don't perhaps felt that I was a very particularly practicing Muslim, why did I feel this reaction to hearing a woman recite the Quran? And then, you know, then even more so when I saw a woman lead the prayer, you know, there was such a turmoil within myself of thinking, this is something that I'm really craving, and yet there's a huge part of me that is feeling a resistance to this. And it's this unpacking of, you know, growing up, tradition, you know, everything that I was exposed to in the madrasa, and this patriarchal religion that we were brought up with. And I just feel really blessed to have been exposed to this, because it's allowed me to really look within myself and say, okay, Allah, who are you? You know, beyond what we've been taught, what is that connection? And the greatest thing that came for me was, you know, through my female teacher and my male spiritual guide in Mevlana, was, for me, I have to connect to Allah as the feminine. And so when we talk about the feminine in Ray, it's not the feminine separate to the masculine. You know, we believe that the feminine encompasses the masculine, just as a healthy masculine encompasses the feminine. And, you know, a lot of our work has been outside of Ray, but it's fed into Ray, has been around the divine attributes, the 99 names of God, the Jamal and the Jalal. You can't have one without the other. And when one becomes toxic, it affects the other. So, you know, toxic masculinity, toxic patriarchy is not a man-only issue, or, you know, or women are the victims of it. Patriarchy affects everybody, all of creation, you know, humanity and our environment, our earth, our skies. You know, we're polluting space now. And so that's been such an awakening for us in understanding that feminine and masculine itself is not gendered. You know, so some of our speakers, you know, and when we talk about, I'm probably moving on to, is everybody welcome? But, you know, it is very much that we want to create a space that is open and welcoming to everyone, regardless of their gender, their faith, their sexuality. You know, we believe that, you know, you come and you're drawn to whatever path that speaks to your heart. And Allah decided what that was, you know, and only she knows what is good for you. And so it's about surrendering to that and trusting. And it's so important to create spaces where we feel welcome and we can ask these difficult questions, because I know I certainly had a lot of them when I first came to Threshold. And if I hadn't been held so beautifully and so safely, I don't know where I would be right now. So.
Wow, well, that was amazing answers from both of you, and especially I'm feeling very moved right now, and you know, because the passages that you read out, Fatimah, were so powerful, and then just listening to both of you talk about the sacred feminine and talk about, you know, your relationship with God and this journey you've been on in terms of understanding the feminine, but then also the masculine, you know, as attributes and as essential parts to understanding God, is amazing and deeply moving, and not something that we often hear about. And I liked the way that you said she when you were referring to Allah, which is not something that we often hear. And there's just so much my head is kind of buzzing with so many questions. And there's so much we could get into, and I'm sure that a lot of this, well, you will get into a lot of this during the festival. So I don't want to kind of take away from that. And what I would really say to people is to, you know, if they're really sort of inspired or interested in what you're both saying during this interview, then they should definitely sign up for the festival. And if you could send me the details of the book as well, and then I'll put that up when I put up the interview on our Instagram and on our YouTube channel as well, so people can also get this well, hopefully they'll get the inspiration as well when they read the book. But I'm still feeling quite moved. I mean, this is really amazing. And actually, I think when I was sort of sitting down and thinking about, talking to you both, I didn't think about our conversation being so deep, actually, as it already has been. So that's really nice. It's not often that you get to have such a sort of deep conversation, and especially over Zoom. And during this whole, we haven't mentioned the C word yet, but especially during the coronavirus as well. We really need this, during these difficult times. And actually, before I sort of ask you both to tell me a bit more about the festival, let me just ask you, how are you finding the pandemic and the coronavirus crisis at the moment?
Me. So, we've been in this within this pandemic for a lot longer than I had imagined. If I'm honest, I felt that by now things would be a little bit different. And so I find that, it's been a real period of really looking within to see how the inner is responding to what's going on externally. I recall initially when we went into lockdown all those months ago, I was in this period, this sort of kind of frenzied activity to sort of plan and protect against every sort of possibility, living with family and and once we entered into the lockdown, it was really then that I stopped and caught myself really and realized, Fati, wow, you've been really stressed and tense about this. And of course that's natural and to be expected, but it was really interesting that even though through our practice, we've really come to start to witness ourselves much more than perhaps we did before, that even in that practice of witnessing, I hadn't been able to see how caught up I had been in the fear and the anxiety. It was in such a subtle way that I couldn't see it. I'd even convinced myself that I was, totally okay with what was unfolding. And so those early weeks were really about processing and really reflecting on what the fears and the anxieties were really about. So it's become a real opportunity to really look at some old fears actually, and that they've really sort of been triggered, and to look at that and to witness it and to try and practice compassion towards myself and towards others in this situation. And then this period was followed by Ramadan, which was such a blessing because Ramadan for me always feels like a real period of protection, almost like nothing can touch your spiritual heart in that time, that you've got this added layer of support. And so within Ramadan really gave me an opportunity within my spiritual practice, within my fasting and within my prayer to really settle into as much as possible this very uncertain time that we found ourselves in, and that prompt to fast and to pray really became just an opportunity for deepening. And really, Saimma alluded to this before as well about connecting deeply to see what are the murmurings of my heart right now, what is the inner wisdom that's coming out here, how is my bond with Allah at this moment, where is my trust, and all of those things in a very gentle kind of loving way. And so there's been real moments within lockdown, within this unfolding of this pandemic, to turn inward, sometimes consciously and sometimes just being pushed that way, because some of what's unfolding externally is very challenging and very difficult. And of course, alongside the pandemic, so much else has unfolded. You know, we've seen the Black Lives Matter movement come back up to the fore, other things, you know, at the moment we've got the elections in America, so there's a lot of external things, you know, going on. And, you know, in that, of course, it's been really interesting to watch oneself within that, and, you know, and to see, you know, what opportunities I can take to come back to the center, to come back to what really matters, you know, to come back. And that's not to say what's happening externally doesn't matter, it matters very much. But what I realize about myself again and again is that my best response to what's happening externally really comes when I take the time to really center back in here. And that's when something much more compassionate emerges, something that's much more grounded, something that is perhaps much more of service both to myself and to others emerges really. Otherwise things can be, you know, bouncing around and very scattered, and really I'm just feel very grateful to be on a spiritual path, and to be surrounded virtually and through heart connections by friends that continually remind me to turn back inwards. And I know I've spoken for quite some length, but I would just quickly mention that one of our spiritual sisters, Dyer Fahim, at the moment, you know, during the pandemic has been in Saudi Arabia, and most Fridays she's going to Medina. And so most Fridays she will send us photographs of the Prophet's mosque, you know, and you know, and she'll send messages, and she'll do prayers for each of us, you know, each of us spiritual sisters in front of the Prophet's mosque. And those weekly reminders, and there are so many other friends who remind in different ways, those reminders are just so welcome, because even within these really difficult times, one is immediately reminded that, you know, the sustenance is right here, you know, the source to which, you know, we need to turn, that the divine is so near, you know, as the Quran says, you know, I am, you know, closer than your jugular vein, you know, and how close is that? And so that reminder that the real, that what is real, you know, and that whole through which we are all joined, you know, it's right there. In any moment you can return to that source of nourishment, which will give you what you need in this moment to meet these external challenges, inshallah, in a way which is grounded in heartfulness and love, inshallah.
Thank you so much for that. I you know, so much of it resonated. I think, you know, just talking about myself just momentarily, you know, sort of I went through that as well with the pandemic, that kind of, you know, that almost sort of ancient sort of, you know, fight or flight kind of reaction, and then you kind of find yourself not doing any, but you're in this kind of mode of survival and fear, but not actually realizing that you're in that mode. So thank you so much for your sort of, you know, answer about how we can navigate that as well, because now obviously it's resurging, and so people will be feeling fearful again. Saimma, I wanted to ask you, you know, to tell us a little bit more about the festival. I'm sure a lot of what Fatimah has just sort of described you will explore during the festival, but could you tell us a bit more about it? And then also one thing that struck me was the sort of mention of Halloween, and that it, you know, the festival is going to coincide with Halloween. And then I was wondering when you mentioned it, because you don't normally, you know, talk, you know, organizations or, you know, people coming together to talk about God and reflect on God don't normally also mention in those same sort of sentences the word Halloween. And I was wondering if you had any kind of, just, you know, was it coincidental that the festivals coinciding with the Halloween weekend, and if you've had any kind of, I guess, backlash from religionists, for want of a better term, just because of the mention of Halloween. And I'm sure there are probably a lot of other things, you know, with regards to the festival that could potentially offend people, which shouldn't. But you know, maybe you could talk about some of those challenges as well, if you want. But yeah, please do tell us about the festival.
Right. Well, it seems like a big one now. Should have swapped with Fatimah. So it was really interesting, the question that you posed about that, because I don't think we know any religionists. I don't know about that term. So if anybody's been offended, or if there has been a backlash, we're certainly not aware of it.
That's good.
So in terms of having it on Halloween, it's Fatima and I were reflecting about this before. It was really interesting. So we wanted to give ourselves a really big window. So I should say, you know, back in January and from last year, the plan was to have this festival in person, as I'm sure lots of organisations had planned for this year. And so we were working towards that at the start of the year. And then obviously in March, everything changed for absolutely everyone. And we had, you know, obviously a moment of just pausing everything as we were just trying to figure out how long this was going to last. You know, was it really going to affect us? And then when we realised it was, you know, around to stay, we had the option of thinking, okay, should we just do it next year? And then we started seeing a few organizations doing things online, and you know, Threshold moved online, so all our in-person circles moved onto Zoom. And we really felt, and you know, Akeela, you touched upon this, we witnessed firsthand the desire, the need for so many people to connect, you know, whether that was spiritually or not, within just community. And you know, I really do not like the term social distancing or social isolation. I really find, you know, I think that language is so important, and words carry power. And you know, so I think back in March I wrote, perhaps, you know, it was a light piece, a light article for Pathos about, I don't want to call it social distancing, I want to call it social spaciousness. And that was a term that somebody else came up with, and I wish I had the reference. Maybe I can find it by the end of the call. But I found it really powerful. I thought, this is what it is. We're not being told that we can't see each other, you know, and that we need to be away from people. Actually, what we're being told to do is stop the outer work and create space for a deeper connection. And I thought, you know, we all felt that was something that was really important, and that we needed to, that was a positive way of focusing on language and the whole situation of the world. And you know, we had more people wanting to join the circles, and you know, Zoom created the opportunity that if you weren't able to come into central London, for example, you know, in Kendal, we're quite remote here, you know, and Fatima's circle as well, people might not be able to travel, that online you could make that time and that space, especially if you know, workplaces had stopped, if people were on furlough, they were working from home, or they were just waiting to find out what happened, rather than worrying, you know, and getting caught up again in the cycle that we've both spoken about, the fear and the anxiety, that you had an opportunity to just stop and take stock. And you know, for me, actually, this time hasn't been a huge change. My brothers joke and say, you know, you've been practicing for this for absolutely years, because I've not been able to work out. I have a mobility issue. I have health reasons. I can't sometimes travel or you know, be very mobile, and so a lot of my work is from home and it's online. And for me, you know, there is the negative side. You know, astaghfirullah, so many people have suffered from it. But in other ways, my world opened up because everybody joined me online. You know, so more people were doing things online, that I couldn't travel to a festival or a conference, you know, or a university, or I couldn't get down to London very easily. And all of a sudden, everything was online. And so, you know, Fatima and I and our trustees, we talked about, well, actually, you know, why put this off if we feel really, you know, really strongly about it, and it could be an opportunity for more people to access it. And having done the 3 retreats in person, that was in Kendal, you know, where I live. But you know, this was going to be our first kind of, our larger offering as a festival rather than a retreat. And then we thought, well, actually, you know, wouldn't it be easier to get more speakers, because we wouldn't have to think about their travel over, their diaries, their accommodation, you know, all of that, all the other overheads that go into an actual in-person event. And then also having it online makes it easier for the speakers, but also for attendees who might be able to pop in and out as they feel able to. And so really for us, we kind of saw the opportunity in that, and we thought, okay, we'll do this. So then it still came to doing a large window. And there was we were thinking, one suggestion was to do it on the September equinox, but that felt a little bit too tight at that time. And for some reason, Halloween had just popped into my head. And not that I'm a particular, you know, I'm not pagan, I'm not a Wiccan, I don't go, you know, I'd love to go dance around a stone circle if I physically was able to, maybe inshallah one day, but it wasn't that connection. What really came to me was, I really feel that Halloween, as well as lots of other Wiccan festivals, has been hijacked, you know, and this negative connotation has been brought to bear upon it, about witches and darkness and all of this. And I feel like a lot of these perhaps more feminine, earth-based festivals are now being reclaimed and recentered as to what they originally were. You know, so Halloween is also Samhain. It's that midpoint between the autumn equinox and the winter equinox. And I think energetically it's a powerful time, and it's a way for us to connect to the earth. And ultimately that's to God, you know, that's to the divine. And I just love the idea of having a festival with all these wonderful, beautiful spiritual women. And it's on this time that there are other gatherings of women, you know, doing rituals, earth-based rituals, sacred rituals, you know, worship, prayer, in whichever way. And it felt quite potent. And so we had this idea. And then I did a post on Facebook a couple of days ago where, you know, I said that when we decided to do it on Halloween, did we know it was a full moon? I'm not entirely sure. But the imagery came together of the moon, because for us, you know, again, the moon represents feminine wisdom. But also, you know, the moon is also symbolic of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. You know, he was the moon-based one, and he was reflecting the light of Allah to humanity. And so a lot of these elements came together. And then when our wonderful designer, Azim Rehmadeen, you know, he kind of put together the many images and descriptions that I gave him into a blue moon. And then we found out, oh, it's not only the full moon, but it's a blue moon, which is a second full moon of the month. And so it just felt like it was divine guiding before we were even aware of it. So, you know, if anybody is offended by it being on Halloween, take it up with God. She decided for us before we even knew that it was meant to be then. So,
I love how you've taken, you know, the concept of Halloween and its sort of traditional sort of, you know, idea of being about witches and what have you, and evil, and being kind of this thing which is an antithesis to God, and you kind of turned it upside down and, you know, made it into something new, but actually it's not new, it's sort of going back to its roots. And I love that. And you've mentioned, you know, feminine wisdom and a feminine spiritual wisdom, and, you know, both of you have spoken about kind of the sacred feminine during this conversation. So I want to just touch a little bit more on that, and just, you know, for our viewers or listeners who don't really know much about feminine spiritual wisdom, you know, could you explain it to us? And maybe, you know, you've touched on why it's important, but also maybe just explain to us a little bit more about why it is important, actually, because it's not, you know, it's not something that we hear about or associate with traditional religion. And I'm not just talking about Islam, you know, I'm talking about all the kind of Abrahamic religions or other religions as well. It's not something that the feminine isn't the kind of first thing you think about when you think about religion, basically.
Yeah, so I mean, before I pass over to Fatimah to talk more about the background of feminine spiritual wisdom, I guess, you know, all of our speakers, they are representative of feminine spiritual wisdom. So, you know, we've got, alhamdulillah, we've got 20 amazing women. You know, a lot of people are saying, wow, you've got so many people. And I said, well, you know, we wanted to really just ask everybody that we would love to sit down and have a conversation with. And maybe, you know, if half of them are able to join us, that would be amazing. Everyone said yes. It was just phenomenal. You know, we're just blown away. And then we just thought, okay, again, this has been, something else is guiding this, and we just need to hurry up and catch up and see how we can hold it. And so absolutely, feminine spiritual wisdom is not just the divine, but it's the people, men and women, who are embodying that calling, that connection to the divine. And each of our speakers is doing that in their own unique, you know, amazing way. And I just want to just briefly touch upon, I'm not going to go through bio for all 20 women, but I do recommend that all the listeners do go to the website and you can read a little bit about each of them. But the schedule is over Halloween weekend. So it's from Saturday 31st to November 1st. And Saturday is a little bit longer because we've got a musical evening where we've got two amazing singers. Not singers, because that kind of seems a little bit less, but we've got Kohenet Rachel Rose Reed, who's going to be sharing some Jewish chants and sharing from her tradition about feminine spiritual wisdom. And then we've got Medina Tinura Whiteman, who's going to be joining us from Spain, to share some Sufi songs and some folk songs from her own background. And then that's going to be the first hour, and the second hour is going to be a playlist that our friend DJ Devotion has put together. And it's just a way for people to, you know, turn their cameras on, cameras off if they want to, and just feel into the music and just do some body movement, which we think is really important. Because during the day, we've got so much, you know, that's going to be offered in terms of exploring the theme of feminine spiritual wisdom under the main theme that we gave to our speakers, which was her space. You know, and that's why I really loved it right at the beginning when you were talking about your organization. That's a lot of what you spoke about is very much about what is her space and how do we amplify her voice, you know, coming from the heart and not from the outside and being told how we should be. And so we've got heart-to-heart panel conversations with women who are leaders in their various traditions. We've got reverends, we've got rabbis, we've got imamas, or as the Dr. Amina Wadud, she prefers the lady imam, because she says that, you know, the imam is not gendered. You know, imam is basically the one who leads, and so it doesn't need to be gendered. But she's just letting everyone know that, you know, she's the lady imam, which I absolutely love. And you know, we've got women from America. We've obviously, we've got Spain. You know, Amina Wadud is in Indonesia. Again, the online platform allowing us access to that. So we have what we've termed heart-to-heart conversations, because what's really key for us is that this is not a conference, this is not a seminar, this is not a debate. You know, again, the wording was really important when we thought about what are we going to call this. And so festival seemed the best thing next up from a retreat, but we want to try and hold it in a very retreat style format. So there will be meditation before each session. The speakers will be speaking from their heart. They're not preparing anything. It's not a paper, it's not a presentation. It's very much responding in the moment to what comes up and sharing from each other. Anything that may come up from one speaker, another speaker can reflect upon. And then, so we have, you know, prayer and meditation within the sessions as well. And then on each day, we also have an embodied experience workshop. So on Saturday, we've got the amazing Rabia Mali from Herbal Blessing Clinic, who's going to guide us through the tradition of a sacred herbal foot bath. So she's going to talk about how that is within all traditions, you know, Islam, Christianity, and, you know, other traditions as well, and how easy that is to do, to nourish oneself at home. And you can use, you know, anything that you have at home, even tea bags. She said your favorite herbal tea bag, you could use that. I didn't know that, you know, that's amazing. So she's going to be talking through, you know, a workshop on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we've got the amazing Naseem Kaku, who is in Denmark, Norway?
Yes.
Which one?
Denmark.
Denmark, it was right the first time. I get confused between the two. Terrible. And she's going to be doing an embodied body experience movement workshop. And she does a lot of those. And we've had her before at the retreats that we've held in Kendal. So it's wonderful to welcome her back and get more people to experience that. So, you know, that, for me, that's feminine spiritual wisdom. It is connecting to all aspects of the body, the mind, the heart, it's not just an intellectual, you know, listening to and kind of critiquing and reflecting back, but you're listening with the heart and you're noticing what comes up for you, and you have an opportunity to ask those questions and to hear from the speakers. So I'm going to pass it over to Fatimah now to carry on.
Well, you gave me a very good start there, actually. So yeah, when I was reading the question, Akeela, I was thinking, gosh, it's so large. But I think in some ways, you know, everything, you know, of course, in all ways, everything that Saimma has said, you know, is true for me also, of course. I feel that, you know, with the feminine itself, you know, and what it means, that's something that we are both on a journey sort of learning about. Where we were at the start is not where we are now, alhamdulillah. Feel our own experience and our own wisdom about the feminine is growing over time, and through our own lived experience and through exposure to women and men that are practicing this way of being. And I really feel that, you know, since the very start, you know, that starting on this journey of exploration of the sacred feminine, you know, we have been learning to embody the feminine more fully within ourselves, to bring our masculine and our feminine into balance. And we've been practicing that in the work that we're doing. So when we've been putting the retreats together, we've been practicing the feminine to really give voice to that. So for example, you know, as a lawyer, you know, for many years, you know, you think in a very linear, kind of very rational way. There's not much room for intuition or for, you know, listening to your inner voice. You know, negotiations are hard and fast. The crux of everything is how much money your client's going to make. It's a world that we have constructed over time, which seems to really honor a very particular way of being. And because so many of the architects of that have been men, it's a very masculine, and a particular kind of masculine way of being. And of course, you know, we often refer to this as, you know, that we live within very patriarchal structures. It honors a particular kind of masculine. And so as a woman operating within those strictures, it was always quite interesting the way, you know, at the time, I was always aware of, actually, this feels a little bit unfair to me as a woman, that I'm sometimes competing against, you know, I'm competing against people who this was designed for, you know. So for example, the culture of, you know, going out in the evening with clients, you know, as a woman, you know, for example, if you have household responsibilities, you can't compete with your male counterparts in that way, who may have had a wife at home taking care of their household responsibilities, just as an example. But there were many, you know, things that would play out in that space, which seemed to favor the men, you know, even in terms of promotion, etc. And we still see that. But what was really interesting is that in all of those years, which was, you know, the best part of my 20s, I didn't really, it was so much the norm that you kind of didn't really question it. But then when we came to start working with the feminine, and what is feminine wisdom, what is a feminine way of being, suddenly, you know, one became really aware that actually usually I think in this way, and it's a very linear, very rational, very strategic. These are the next steps. This is who we need. This is how we're going to do it. And then suddenly we're learning and witnessing from men and women who really embody this balance of the masculine and the feminine, that really embody feminine wisdom and a healthy masculine, that, you know, you kind of in their orbit and you're beginning to absorb some of their way of being, and suddenly you're interacting with everything you're doing in a different way. So when we're putting together these retreats, I think one of the key things that I learned, and maybe Saimma might share some of the things that she has learned, but one of the things that really, particularly with the second retreat, I think one of my big realizations was that when I could really step out of the way myself, you know, like when my ego could really step out of the way of what it thought it was going to achieve through this retreat, that beauty just flowed. And that if I could just step, if my ego and my desire to show what I could do could move out of the way for a second, which, you know, alhamdulillah, you know, we were held in prayer by many people in that whole process. So that was, you know, enabled, we were helped in that to be receptive. And then it was just amazing to see that when one is receptive, which is often seen as a feminine quality, how the divine just fills that space and everything comes together in the most beautiful way. And that doesn't mean to say that there's no efforting on mine and Saimma's part, but it's just that almost you let go a little bit of what your expectations are and what you want to show of yourself through it. You know, you just ask Allah for her help in being humble and allowing things to flow through you. And in that second retreat particularly, there was a real deepening in this realization that actually we don't need to worry about this, because as long as we keep returning to the intention of being of service and genuinely, truthfully, just really wanting to understand what the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine is really about, if we just keep returning to that, then beauty will flow. And that has been our experience again and again. And that's not to say that in the moment we don't get caught up with our big eyes, you know, because I do, you know, and it's really wonderful. And then something will happen and Allah will remind me, yeah, not I, but me, you know, but I, as in the really big I, you know, the real, that's what matters. And it seems that the more we commit ourselves to the path of truth and really wanting to know our creator and really wanting to know those attributes of the masculine, of the feminine, that the more we are again reminded. So when we go off track, you know, we really feel the pushback of like, yeah, Fatimah, you think this, but really it's like that. And it's subtle and it happens through events. It happens through the words that your friends or your family say to you. It happens through a feeling in the heart where you realize, okay, you know, this is becoming a bit too much about me and I need to just remember what this is really about. And so, you know, just returning always. And I think that, you know, in this, all of this, we are learning about what feminine wisdom is, and we are learning to harness that energy and to allow it to flow through us. And maybe inshallah, you know, it will be in full flow, and only the divine knows how much that is, you know, really coming through. And there are so many different you know, a different sort of slight, not vastly different, but there are subtle configurations on how people view the feminine. And sometimes people see this idea of the feminine as receptive as quite a negative thing because they feel it's passive, but there is an active receptivity. My goodness, it is, you know, being receptive is not easy. You know, having lived a life of being active, you know, as I'm sure most of us have, you know, to then bring the receptive into balance with the active, you know, subhanallah, it is an ongoing process that we are engaged in. And, you know, may God guide us in that, you know.
Thank you.
And yeah.
Sorry, thank you so much for sharing your journey, because, you know, I was sort of not half expecting, but kind of, you know, I thought you might talk about some sort of concept, you know, theory that people could then go away and read and maybe kind of digest. But actually what you've spoken about is very much a lived experience and very much a journey. And I think if people do want to understand, you know, what spiritual feminism and what the sacred feminine is, sorry, not feminism, that's a slip of the tongue. So what,
that's good,
you know,
too. That's good too.
But if they want to understand, you know, this concept of the sacred feminine and what, you know, feminine spiritual wisdom is, then, you know, I think we've, you know, just sitting here, I've benefited hugely from listening to you, but I think also people will have to kind of go away and kind of explore that journey for themselves. And, you know, Saimma, earlier you spoke about being confronted when you sort of began this journey a little bit. And I think it is confronting. I've had similar experiences, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers will have maybe, you know, one might have felt challenged or confronted listening to this conversation. But I think that's something which actually then can create opportunity for learning. I'm so sorry. This conversation has been amazing and time has just flown by. And so we're sort of running out of time. So I kind of wanted to just sort of end on a sort of, I guess something, you know, about what or who inspires you.
Oh, thank you, Akeela. I would have to say, of course, initially, Fatimah inspires me. I wouldn't be here doing the work that I'm doing and really be the person that I am, of having connected to the divine feminine, if I hadn't had the mirror and the holder of, you know, a partner who was able to share this with me. So I'm really grateful, and I hope this journey will continue for many years to come. And I think every speaker we have is genuinely an inspiration to me. That's why we reached out to them, you know, because these are women that we would just love to just sit and you know, kind of listen to and see them in action. They've been doing a journey, I mean, amazing journeys. Some of them are older, some of them are younger. And what is really inspirational about this whole process is the intergenerational, you know, aspects of all the speakers and what they've been doing, and being able to hear from them and just think, yes, you know, actually I was thinking about doing that, but I wasn't sure, and now I feel empowered and say, yes, I'm going to do this, and I can connect with them and ask them for advice, you know, and hear from their pitfalls and maybe try and navigate away from them. And then finally, I have to say, from the 3 retreats that we've done, a huge inspiration has been the men that have come. And I really want to highlight the fact that, you know, I said earlier, this is open to everyone, but when we say all genders are welcome, that includes men. Men are very welcome. And I don't think men realize that. I was having a conversation with my brother, and he said, you know, when men see an all-female panel, they think it's women only. And I said, well, what about all male panels? And he said, well, all male panels are for everyone. He said, it's a man's world, unfortunately. You know, and I thought it was a really interesting insight to have. So we thought we need to really highlight that, because the men in our community in Threshold Society, they know that they're welcome, and we want everyone to know that. But it's been really beautiful to see the experiences of men coming to our retreats and being willing to be in a predominantly women space, and it's, you know, women held, women guided, and to see them really letting go of their baggage and being willing to immerse themselves into the conversations, into the explorations around sacred text. And, you know, one of our trustees is a man who's been at all our retreats. And I remember at the last retreat, I think it was some poetry that we were doing with Lal Dead, and he had such a powerful reaction and a sharing to that. And that's always stayed with me. We cannot do this work women only, right? We are women led and women guided because that's really important to us. But this is a collaborative process with everyone. And that is so, so important, because nothing in the world, you know, can happen with just one. That Allah is the manifestation of all the attributes, 99, which is really infinity, the Jamal and the Jalal. And some of those attributes you might think are Jamal are actually Jalal. And some of those attributes you think of Jalal are actually Jamal. You cannot define this, you cannot separate this. And so, yeah, it's all one, alhamdulillah.
Amazing. And Fatimah, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, the inspirations are, you know, alhamdulillah, one really can't be grateful enough, because the inspirations are so many. And I think that, you know, when one's heart is opened and continually open, because one is held within a spiritual community, or one holds an intention of trying to remain open, then actually the inspiration just comes from every direction. But, you know, alhamdulillah, there is so much that I have learnt and continue to learn through this process of working with Saimma. And yes, she is one of my inspirations too, you know, one of many. But the way, you know, alhamdulillah, I'm always, it's like a constant kind of, you know, in working together, a constant reminder of how much of a gift that is actually to work together. Because, you know, it's you know, I'm somebody that historically, you know, would always work better, but, you know, I thought I always worked better by myself, you know, and so,
Me too.
but, you know, this has been a really, over these years, since we started doing this together back in 2013, we started with Rumi Circle, and, you know, there were other friends involved too. But, you know, this work together has just shown me again and again the absolute beauty of the collaborative process. You know, so often we think, yeah, my way is the right way, you know, and then you're forced in a situation like this to alter the way that you're thinking, to see things from the other person's perspective, to see where is this coming from in me, you know, and then you realize that together you create something far more beautiful than you would have done by yourself. And every moment, you know, because the ego is so strong, every moment, at every turn, one is reminded that, yeah, you know, it's so much better like this, isn't it, Fati? And I'm like, yeah, it's so much better like this. And so, yes, the inspirations are many, and my friend Saimma is a deep inspiration for many reasons. And this whole process is continually inspiring. I think one really sees that when we're living, you know, as close to our heart's desire as possible, you know, the inspirations are coming, you know, and this is again a part of, I guess we would say, a part of the feminine. Actually, the more we're listening within, the more the inspiration is flowing, you know, the more we clear of ourselves, you know, out of the way, the I that wants to design the perfect festival all by herself, you know, you know, the more she moves out of the way, the more, you know, the inspiration, alhamdulillah, continues to flow. So yeah, and I think that, you know, one of your questions, which I know we won't really get time to hit now, was about, you know, the message that, you know, you wish everybody would take away from it. But really, I would just say instead that, you know, what we hope every person will bring is just a really receptive heart, because as Saimma said, these women and all conscious men and women, all those striving on a path and on a way to the truth, their stories are, you know, are so beautiful, are so heart inspiring. They show us a way, you know, they show us a way. And even if our religious tradition is different, there is a way in which a gift is given to us by them through their sharing. And perhaps this is also, you know, the feminine way. The feminine way has always been to tell stories, not to write them down, but to tell them. And that's what will be happening at the festival. People will be telling their stories, essentially. And in that way, you know, hearts will be enlivened, inshallah, if we can be open to it. Thank you.
Well, you know, I have been so inspired by listening to both of you talking, and I've actually learned so much. So thank you so much for joining me today and talking about the festival, which is running from the 31st to the 1st of November. And people can find out more about the festival on, if you just tell me the website again, please. It's
rayofgod.com.
Ray of God.
And
Wow.
we're on social media, Ray of God 0.
Okay, brilliant. So everybody needs to go and check out rayofgod.com right now and sign up to the festival if they can. And just a final, you know, thank you so much. And, you know, I wish the best of luck and the best of, you know, all the stars and the moon and everything being aligned, and as I'm sure it will be, and all the energy flowing. And I really hope that, yeah, I really hope the festival goes more than well and people do open up their hearts and, you know, take away a lot, which I'm sure they will do. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for everything that you have spoken about today. It's been amazing.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been beautiful. It's so lovely to spend this time with you.
Thank you.